everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, we're doing our rewatch of the Ohio State game weekly show. Normally it's like, wow, I have so many things that I didn't see. This week we were talking before we hit record. It's like, well, the butt kicking was more thorough than it looked like live, I guess. I mean, that was, and it's like, I've got notes, I've got stuff that I noticed, but like, ooh, that was, I walked out of the stadium on Saturday night going, wow, they really kicked their butts. And then you rewatch it, it was like, oh no, it was not nearly as close as I thought it was. That was, wow.
Yeah, it was bad. I always enjoy doing this show because it's the only time I can watch Buckeye football and get totally hammered. So I could not read most of my notes.
We're recording this in the middle of the afternoon on Wednesday, so
I stand by my statement. Would you like to start since it is Your Honor? It's not really. This is not a competition. Let's not make it a competition. But please begin.
All right. So I'm going to start with the second touchdown for Cade Stover. The first one is the one where he flipped into the end zone, and you all saw that. The second one was the one where C.J. Stroud's kind of rolling right. And what struck me was there's two Wisconsin players out there. Both of them left Cade Stover and took off after C.J. Stroud, which is really interesting because, I think the thought process all along has been, well, since C.J. Stroud never runs, opponents will not respect the run. You wonder if Wisconsin, knowing that the Wisconsin game was kind of a big game and, Ohio State quarterbacks will typically run a little more in big games than they do in other games, if they went, ha ha ha, ha ha, I know, ha ha, this is what he's doing, I got it, yeah, and they both took off after C.J. Stroud and then left Cade Stover wide open. And you wonder if just, obviously the threat of the run is still there to such a degree that it's getting respected, even though C.J. Stroud's not actually really ever running the ball more than maybe once a game. That was really kind of an interesting thing to me that was just, it kind of makes you wonder how much other teams are preparing for C.J. Stroud running in anticipation of, well, he has to do it sometime.
They've got to put it on tape. But yeah, I think once he tucks the ball, that's essentially faking the tennis ball throw to the dog, and the dog goes running. And except this time there actually was a throw. Like, it's the opposite, but the same principle where you're just doing something with a ball to fool somebody. And once he tucked it and they took off, they triggered on that tuck, and then you just toss it over there. And clearly, these two defenders were not aware what year it was, Tom. This, as we know, is the year of the tight end. And Cade Stover is living up to that billing, as we told you he would. Many people had questions. We did not have questions. And he is more than just a pass catcher. Like, he had some really good blocks in this game. He was helping as that sixth offensive lineman, that second outside tackle a lot with these outside runs were fantastic. And so, yes, Cade Stover, a tremendous weapon in this game, and also the running ability of C.J. Stroud, where he's done this a lot, like extended plays. This was a designed play. And again, great job by him to scramble and make something out of it. So, and I don't know that we exactly explained the show for the people who are new here. We're just giving our 5 thoughts each on 5 things we learned from rewatching the game if this is your first time tuning in for this episode. My first one is something we wondered about going into that game. How would Jim Knowles defend the run? And he defended the run exactly the way he wanted to with his nickel defense. And not just his nickel defense, Tom. He started Jack Sawyer instead of JT Tuimoloau. So he's like, you know what? I'm going to go even smaller. You guys don't think I could do this. I'm going to take out my big defensive end and put in my smaller defensive end, and we're still not going to allow the running game to do anything to us. And they didn't until the last drive and the drive before that or so, when most of that was against the backups. But I think it's pretty interesting that we did eventually see Court Williams kind of as a Sam, but in that first quarter, we saw Sonny Styles there as well. And that was something that could not see live from the press box because the numbers, you can't see the numbers up there. And I won't get into that. People know my thoughts on that. We've shared them before. Black jerseys are terrible for trying to see numbers up top. But those guys played sparingly. It was Tanner McAllister and the two safeties and the two corners, a redshirt freshman and a true freshman. The fact that they held up as well as they did, I think, answered, I don't know if it answers every question about can this 4-2-5 stop the run, but it certainly answered if they can stop the Wisconsin running game.
And it feels like they probably have answered the question of can they stop every running game at least until Michigan at this point. I mean, Iowa, I don't think Iowa is going to be appreciably better than Wisconsin was. Penn State, the more distance you get from the Auburn game, the more you kind of think, I think Auburn might just be really bad. And I don't think that Penn State's going to be able to consistently run the ball. They got some talented running backs. The offensive line is better, but I don't think it's going to be that much better. And Northwestern, no. Indiana, no. I mean, there's just Maryland, probably not. I mean, they didn't. It doesn't seem like there's anyone who's going to be able to really force Ohio State to get out of that. Now, when you get to Michigan, when you get to potentially Georgia or Alabama or someone like that, maybe at that point you're going to change. And I guess the question then is it better to not have had to put that on film? Is that better to, or would it be better to have a little bit of experience running that before you get to that point? You don't want to try something for the first time when you're in, the real high leverage spots of the season. So. But I mean, so far so good, and maybe they can make this work all season. If they can make this work all season and not have to get away from this, that I think tells me this is probably a championship season for Ohio State. If they can really not, if no one can force them to get away from what they want to do on defense, it would probably take a lot to beat them at that point. So that would be very good news, and I guess so far so good, and on that front for Ohio State. Another thing that is going pretty darn well for Ohio State, boy, that offensive line is pretty good. The running lanes, just how often were the running lanes just huge? And even, they ran a graphic at one point where it was like Mayan Williams, yards after contact, and it was like he didn't exactly get, like a guy squaring up on him in the hole, and it was like, well, someone got an arm on him, yes, and then he ran 25 yards, but just the running lanes were big. There were even times there was a 3rd and 5 on the field goal drive in the first half where, you look at it and it's 3rd and 5 and the line got like crazy. I mean, the line pushed the defensive line like 2-3 yards downfield. They didn't get it. They didn't convert the third down. But just the push that the offensive line got just was crazy. And this is not Arkansas State. This is not UConn or Hawaii. This is Wisconsin. This is what is probably going to be an above-average Big Ten West defensive line. And they had nothing for that Ohio State offensive line all game. There was a great stat in the media notes this week from Jerry Emig and Mike Bassford. Ohio State has allowed a total of 12 tackles for loss and sacks. So 10 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. Only Georgia has been better. Ohio State tied for second in the country with, Tony?
Michigan?
Ball State. Very close. Very close. And another great note in there, apropos of absolutely nothing, Ohio State has scored 27 touchdowns this season, tied for the most in the country with whom, Tony?
That would be my Kansas Jayhawks.
It is, in fact, my Kansas Jayhawks. Yes, well done. Yes, that is, I'll tell you what, you do a Twitter search on your timeline for your username and Lance Leipold's name, and I'll do one for mine, and I bet I beat you by 3 or 4 years. But yes, go on. Yes, go ahead.
I was too busy yelling about Turner Gill, okay? So
tough but fair, yes.
There were so many times where Mayan Williams would go like 12 yards down the right side or left side before he got touched and just like running through a tunnel. And it's like, please, no pictures, stay away from him. It's like security escorting him to the sideline in a fast fashion. It's like, we got to get this, it's the president, it's this, Secret Service. And you're just like ushering him out of the ballroom, and really, really good job by the offensive line. So I would agree with you on that one. Speaking of blockers, Tom, and not just blockers, but Julian Fleming is, my note here says, Julian Fleming is turning it on. And that's as a pass catcher, that is as a blocker, that is as a guy who makes plays in the open field now. Like the one catch and the juke and then the run was, I think, the best play that stood in his career, and showed his agility and then showed his speed because he turned it on as soon as he caught that and got started. But on a lot of these long runs and a lot of these throws to Emeka over the middle, you've got Julian Fleming blocking his man like 5, 6, 8 yards beyond the play. And I feel like he should get some rushing yards added to his receiving total somehow. I don't know how you do that, but, like he was responsible for, say, 25 rushing yards. Give 12.5 to him, and then 12.5 to the running back, something like that. But Ryan Day talked about his physicality on Tuesday, and he's 6'2", like 205, just strong, and came from a program in high school where he had to run block a lot, and you're seeing all of this now in play with the Buckeyes, and really, really happy for him. Really good to see it, and I'm no longer now that he's out there, he's just a piece of the puzzle now. Now it's like, okay, now it's time for him to start making plays, and he's doing that. And I'm waiting. I think he's going to explode here pretty soon in one of these games.
Well, I had a very similar note on here that, you've been hearing about it with Julian Fleming for so long, and you're finally now seeing it. Just the last couple weeks, he had that one, toe tap touchdown against Toledo in the corner of the end zone. And then, the run blocking, you talked all about that. You talked about the play where he's on the outside, makes a guy miss and turns on the jets, and it was like, that was impressive. And then, like 2 plays later on that same drive, he catches a ball over the middle and fights through tackles. And he probably got hit by 3 or 4 guys as he was trying to go into the end zone, and he ended up getting in the end zone. And, so you've got the agility to make people miss, you've got the speed to potentially run past people, you've got the run blocking, and you have the toughness to catch it over the middle and potentially, shed some tacklers and force your way into the end zone. That sounds like, largely a complete package in terms of being a wide receiver. And he is someone who, you've been hearing about it for so long. You've been hearing about it for years in terms of practice, and you wouldn't believe the plays this guy's making in practice. And we go, wow, I bet we would love to see that. I'll tell you what, why don't you let us in and we'll watch, and then we can, well, you'll have to hear about it. Now you're finally seeing it because it's happening on Saturdays when they put it on TV and they let everyone see it. So, I'm right there with you. He and Cam Babb, I think, are the 2 guys on the team this year who are, they've been banged up. And you've been waiting, and you've been waiting, and you've been waiting, and it's been potential and hope, and, can they stay healthy? And it just hasn't happened. Julian Fleming it is now happening for him, and, hopefully Cam Babb can follow along shortly after that as well. I will pass that one on my list, and I will give you another one. This is like a very little thing, but right before halftime, Wisconsin's got the ball going down the field. They were kind of near, maybe a little across midfield, something like that. Graham Mertz runs it up the middle, slides. Tommy Eichenberg is coming, and he pulls up. You saw Lathan Ransom get called for a late hit or targeting or something against Notre Dame on a quarterback run similar to that. Tommy Eichenberg pulls up. That avoids a penalty that would have pushed them into field goal range with like 20 seconds left in the half. It's just one of those little things. Like, I think we've talked about Tommy Eichenberg in a lot of different contexts, and he's doing a lot of different things and putting up some really big numbers. But it's just like, that was just a very heady, responsible veteran play where you're sort of rushing, your adrenaline's up in the 2-minute drill at the end of the half. It would have been very easy to just slide, jump in and drill him as he's sliding. It was just like a very, very little thing, but probably saved them 3 points. And then I had missed. I don't know how. I was on the far end of the field. I had already started back towards the photo bunker, so I didn't see the Tanner McAllister play up close. There were a lot of bodies between me and that. Like, holy smokes, that was a great play at the end of the half to come off his guy and then break that play up. And everyone who's watching on TV is like, how did you miss that? It's like, well, I'm off doing my job, and sometimes my job is on the other end of the field, and there are bodies between me and that, and I just didn't get to see it. But that was a great play. Way
to get your excuses in there, Tom. Good job on you.
See, as soon as the X-ray specs that I ordered from the back of the Mad magazine come in, it will then I'll be able to see through people, but not yet, Tony. Not.
I believe you can only see through your hand with those glasses, for what it's worth. But
there goes my brilliant plan. I guess back to the drawing board.
The Tanner McAllister thing, Tim Walton addressed that today when somebody asked, so did J.K. Johnson just really get beat on that, or what happened there? He said, no, it was a 4th and 3, so they were expecting a short pass. So J.K. Johnson, he was kind of defending the flats, and it was too deep, and Tanner McAllister had the deep half of that field. And so the reason J.K. Johnson was close to that play is because he was trying to help out, and Tanner McAllister made the play that he was supposed to make. So don't blame J.K. Johnson for that one. Back to Tommy Eichenberg, because this is also one of my points that I just learned from watching this game. My note here says, Tommy Eichenberg is so sound. Like, he is not out of position. He is not, over the last couple of years, we'll see like linebackers come out of nowhere and go to nowhere. Like, I don't know if like they're glitching and they're just walking across the screen type of thing. Everywhere he goes has a purpose, and generally he's in the right spot. You see him anticipating, getting in position for where the play is going to go before the snap. And I don't know that the play's necessarily going there, but that's where it ends up, as in the same place that he's going. As you said, pulls up on that, just really, really sound. The kind of guy, like he could be playing linebacker, and you could be like, watch my kid while you're playing linebacker. And he would be able to like, watch your kid safely, play linebacker. Nobody would get hurt except for maybe the ball carrier, but you can trust this guy. And, the defense, Jim Knowles has trusted him, and, he's as Ryan Day said, he's the leader of the defense, and every week he's proven it.
Yeah, he's for sure been someone who I think has, you heard stuff about him all spring and summer, and it was like, okay, and it was so consistent that you get to a point with these guys where you hear about someone once and it's like, okay, that's a data point. When you keep hearing the same name over and over and over again, it's like, okay, at some point it really starts to mean something. Like that Marvin Harrison Jr. was someone from like day one that he stepped on campus. You kept hearing that name. Okay. And at some point it's like, all right, so I believe you. This guy probably is pretty good. Spoiler alert, that guy is pretty good. See, you're kind of at the same point with Tommy Eichenberg. He's probably not quite as athletic as Marvin Harrison, but he's, for the position he's in, he has been exactly what they needed. And, you wonder how much of the credit goes to Jim Knowles, and, was there a substantial step up in linebacker coaching? It feels like the linebacker coach position has not been great for Ohio State for quite a while. It feels like it might be pretty darn good now. So, yeah, that is... I think that's that he is definitely someone who has been, Steel Chambers has been very good. Feels like Cody Simon's been pretty good, but Tommy Eichenberg has definitely been, I think, head and shoulders above everyone else, at least at the moment there. Let's see, next one. I've got one more on defense and one more on offense. We'll start with defense. First drive of the third quarter, Jyaire Brown. They went after Jyaire Brown a little more than I was sort of thinking they had. It just they didn't really do anything when they went after him, which is a pretty good sign. First drive of the third quarter, there was Wisconsin had the ball, and they sort of started with like a promising-looking drive coming out of the half, and there was one where Jyaire Brown was kind of like up near the line of scrimmage, and he I think had the back out of the backfield or something like that, and then the back stayed into block. And so he runs back and covers a tight end in space. Just very good awareness. Just didn't get nosy, didn't try to do too much. Forced Graham Mertz to run. He was short of the first down. And then on the next play, he was trying to tackle, I think it was a Braylon Allen run, and he was right there at the point of attack, drew a holding penalty, that wiped out a Braylon Allen run. Wisconsin ends up punting, and it was like the last gasp of Wisconsin potentially making it remotely interesting, and Jyaire Brown was kind of involved right at the point of attack in two different plays in two different ways, but had a really positive impact on both of those. there's still a long way to go for him. But, I thought watching, he was more involved than I sort of thought he was live, and was involved in pretty good ways pretty consistently.
Yeah, and I know there's some people who question the pass interference penalty against him as well, including his head coach. I do wonder the last time Ohio State had started a freshman corner in back-to-back seasons, because it does not happen all that often, and Denzel Burke being the first true freshman to start the season opener since the 80s. Malcolm Jenkins started as a true freshman, but that was, game 5, game 6 or so. I'm not sure anybody started after or before him in terms of freshman the year before him or year after him. Like, this is one, a product of the depth. This is also, two, a product that, as Ryan Day and Tim Walton said, Jyaire Brown and J.K. Johnson may have not missed a rep of practice in preseason and spring. They're always available. And when you look at the cornerback room, they were the only two that have always been available. And so, yeah, good on them for earning the right to start there and playing well enough to not get benched. Not that there's too many people to turn to, but he did, Walton said they can go with Cameron Martinez. They can do Tanner McAllister if they need to. But, no, I don't think they did. And so, yeah, that was impressive job by both of those. And Jyaire Brown, yeah, he's still learning. We get to talk to him on Wednesday. That will be interesting. First time that he has probably spoken with the media since January or February, when all of the early enrollees talked. So good to get his thoughts on how his first 9-10 months on campus have gone.
Yeah, he's someone who I think is sort of living out the old maxim that the best availability is the best ability is availability. It's kind of, next man up, and you're running out of men. So he's and I mean, both he and J.K. Johnson graded as champions against Wisconsin. And let's frame this correctly. Wisconsin is not, this is not a early 90s David Klingler Houston Cougars team where they're going to be lighting up scoreboards with their explosive passing attack, but it is a Big Ten team. It is a Big Ten team with a quarterback that Ohio State recruited, and they have Big Ten, they have scholarships and helmets and pads too, as Kevin Noon likes to say. So, I think you have to kind of keep things in perspective. But that being said, that's pretty darn good for a true freshman to be out there and not just be completely lost and not just get constantly picked on. I mean, you can go back over the years and, the guys who were playing in the late third and early fourth quarters of games where Ohio State's up by 50 points, generally those guys are getting picked on a little bit because they're not really ready for prime time. He quite literally was ready for prime time on Saturday, so good for him.
Good for him indeed. And kind of leads into my next point. The overall depth of this team has really shown up. You look at running backs. You lose Evan Pryor. You move in Dallin Hayden. He already has a 100-yard day. You've got Mayan Williams, Travion Henderson, both playing very well, playing together, showcasing that depth. You lose Jackson Smith and Jigba for however long he's gone. You've got Emeka Egbuka, Marvin Harrison, Julian Fleming solidifying things. Jaden Ballard already has a 100-yard receiving day. Xavier Johnson with a touchdown already this season. The depth there has stepped up. And the depth in the secondary. If they lose another cornerback, they're going to be like ghost man at boundary corner, basically, is what's going to happen. And so the depth has shown up there. Depth at safety, where Lathan Ransom didn't play, and Josh Proctor gets benched during the first game. Lathan Ransom comes in. Like, these two guys are essentially interchangeable. Josh Proctor playing really well. Lathan Ransom has played well. Ronnie Hickman solid as a rock, and Tanner McAllister, Cameron Martinez is able to go in there at nickel or dime, and they've needed all of these guys, and so they've done a really solid job at the areas where guys have been missing. Guys have stepped up, that next man up that you've talked about. And this is game 4. And they've gone pretty deep already, and those guys have played well when called upon.
Well, I think this team has 2 pretty solid wins right now. And, you'll hear lots of people litigating exactly how good and or bad Notre Dame is. And Wisconsin's not a top 5 team or anything like that. But those are 2 solid wins over programs that are going to be, 8-ish win teams probably this fall. And this was a massacre against Wisconsin. And you look at it, and things have, this has not been a season where everything has gone perfectly for Ohio State. They've had a lot of injuries to really key players, and they've just kind of kept rolling. And that's what good teams do. Good teams are not relying on just the one guy who holds everything together. This is football. Guys get hurt. You're playing without people. And to just have, whoever the next person is, just be able to step up, that's, we talk about that all the time in terms of the difference between Ohio State and Michigan's rosters. And, Michigan has the top level talent, but then when you get into the depth, sometimes the depth isn't quite, there's a drop off in a way that there isn't necessarily with the Ohio State team. And this feels like there's even less of a drop off than there typically is with an Ohio State team. So that for sure is a big thing. And, someone else, someone who is somewhat a depth guy, a little bit a depth guy, someone who was not certain to be starting this year was Emeka Egbuka at the start of the season. And, once Jackson Smith-Njigba and Julian Fleming were down, well, then he's stepping up, and he's put up some monster numbers already. He also was part of the last play I wanted to talk about, which the tight end, the touchdown that he scored that made it 45-7. It was like a little slant or a post or something over the middle, and watching it live, it was like, boy, that looked like a pretty tight window. That was an impressive throw. Watching on TV, like, holy smokes, how did C.J. Stroud fit that ball in there? There was a guy behind him, a guy in front of him, and the guy behind him was like behind him on the left, and the guy's in front of him on the right, and it's like there was nowhere to throw that ball, and he hit him right in the hands. I have a picture of that. We'll find out together if I remember. I have a great picture of that I can throw up over this thing at 26 minutes into the show. We'll see if I remember to actually do it when I edit this together on YouTube. But if I do, congratulations to me. But yeah, it was impressive live, and then going back and watching it later, it was really impressive. And that's a play that was in the second half when it was kind of the game was out of reach, and C.J. Stroud wasn't fantastic the whole time. It wasn't, this was not like the greatest C.J. Stroud performance in history, and you can still just make that kind of throw between two pretty good defensive backs.
Watching that throw live, I believe my remark was that it was like the hardest throw I've ever seen C.J. Stroud make, the highest velocity. And also, it seemed like he didn't see the underneath defender, because there was like a Wisconsin defender like running towards the ball with his arms up, and it didn't matter. And catching that ball was even better than the throw. The throw is really, really good. The fact that he held onto the ball when there is traffic around and there are hands in the way of the ball and your sight of it, and then they still snatched it. Really impressive. Emeka Egbuka right now second in the Big Ten in receiving yards per game at 110.5, behind Charlie Jones of Purdue, former Iowa Hawkeye. The wisest man in the Big Ten. But how wise do you need to be as a wide receiver to get out of Iowa City? Like, I don't want to call him the dumbest man in the Big Ten because that's a shot, but maybe good job by him to get out of Iowa City. I'll just say that.
More yards per game right now. Charlie Jones is a Purdue wide receiver, or Spencer Petras as Iowa's quarterback. It might be close.
Well, Tom, let me look real quick. I think it's going to be Charlie Jones, honestly. Let's see. Spencer Petras, 131 yards a game.
Yeah, closer than the experts think.
Charlie Jones got him by 2 yards. Or, as they call that in Iowa, a big gain.
There you go. One other thing that I noticed on the broadcast that I had forgotten to mention on the postgame show that I just thought was sort of an interesting thing. It was one of those, I didn't know that. I'm not sure if that's true, but you outrank me because you pay more money for this, so therefore I will have to believe you. I was down in the back corner of the end zone on Ohio State's first drive, with the one where Emeka Egbuka had that long pass and Julian Fleming had the good block, and they're coming right. I've got great pictures of Emeka Egbuka coming right towards me, right as I'm lined up with the sideline, and then an ABC cameraman comes over and says, "You have to move. I need to be here on the, I've got to be here on the line for replay." And it was like, is that true, or do you just want to? Okay, I guess. Your network has paid, $10 million more to be here tonight than mine has, so I guess you outrank me, so I guess I'll move. But there you go. If you ever wondered how the sausage gets made, like, how do they get those great shots? Well, they just kick other people out. So there you go. That was one of those things that I was like, I'll have to remember to mention this on the post-game show. People might find that interesting. And then by the time we do the post-game show for the the night games, my brain has turned to oatmeal. And so sometimes you find them out and then, on the Tuesday show. But we get there eventually.
I know, in a sense, how you feel, what you're talking about, because when I'm down on the sideline and you got all of these cameramen, thousands of dollars worth of cameras, and I'm like right next to them with my phone. And just the disdain that you get looked at by these people, these, and I call them people, they're photographers. Let's not, but like we're all just standing there and they're like, really professional. I'm just holding my phone like a doof.
I'm glad that you have the phone there to give you the plausible deniability that they're probably looking at me like an idiot because of my phone. It's like, that's probably what it is. Okay.
Well, like when I'm walking around the mall and, I'm just hanging out around town, I have my phone out that way. Exactly. Like, why is this weirdo with the phone? It's like, oh yeah, I'm weird because of my phone. That's all. My last thing, Tom, CJ Stroud checked out after 21-0. That is my note here. And he was absolutely awesome. 8 for 8 to start the game. Then he was 5 of 12 over his next 12 passes. He mentioned after the game that he needs to make sure that he doesn't get bored and that he stays engaged. And then he was like, not that I got bored or wasn't engaged, but I just need to make sure that I am. And it's like, were you like, because if you're talking about needing to make sure you do it, then it sounds like maybe you thought you didn't. And so then I asked Ryan Day about that on Tuesday, and I began the question by saying, Ryan, I know it's, Ryan, I think it's silly when people criticize CJ Stroud when basically they're judging him against perfection. But he talked about the need to stay engaged and the need to not get bored. And did you notice any of that? And he's like, no, he was fine. He threw 5 touchdowns. He was very, very good. And then I also said, well, do you think, you don't like to, you've talked about, you don't want to give him too much. Don't want to put too much on his plate. Do you think maybe if you give him more, he'll stay more engaged? And he's like, CJ Stroud is engaged. All right. I was like, oh, big news. CJ Stroud is engaged. But not like that. But like, he was just saying like, CJ is critical of himself. And so he's just trying to tell people in, I don't know, media speak, basically. I'm not sure. Like, why did I make these mistakes? Yeah, I just need to be more engaged, something like that. And so, but he was clearly a different guy after it was 21-0. That being said, there are times where he's still really, 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 really good, even after he's kind of checked out a little. And so, yeah, like you could certainly win with that. You just wonder this score, not if he had stayed perfect, but he left some throws out there. The protection that broke down on what was going to be a touchdown to Julian Fleming in the second half on a deep throw, like that wasn't necessarily on CJ Stroud, but you beat Wisconsin 52-21, and you may have left 2 or 3 touchdowns out there. That's pretty impressive.
Well, you beat Wisconsin 52-21, and also Wisconsin outscored you 14-7 in the last 20 minutes or so of the game. And also, you left some points out on the field, and and there were also a couple plays where CJ Stroud threw 1 interception, and there were a couple others where he could have, he could have gotten himself into some trouble, and some of them got through for completions. There was one where I think a defensive end dropped back into like a zone coverage, and Stroud just didn't see him, and he could have had a pick six. So you could have put a touchdown or 2 on Wisconsin's score. You could have put another touchdown or 2 on Ohio State's score. But, if you're up 45-7 on a team that before the season people were looking at and going, well, this is one of probably the 4 toughest games on the schedule, like, that's probably not too bad. And not every game is going to be the Michigan State game from last year. It's not always going to just be absolutely perfect and, just constant 56-yard touchdowns, but I think for that to be a game that people walked away and going, he was just okay, I think tells you almost more about CJ Stroud than you learn when he's really on.
Yeah, and I'm the guy saying, I think criticism of C.J. Stroud to most degrees is unfair, and that's why I don't like it. Not because I'm some homer, but because he's really freaking good, and he's better than almost anybody we've ever seen at Ohio State. But when he opens himself up to that in his comments, that's why I asked. Not that I just wanted to get Ryan Day's thoughts on it, because I am one of these guys that, not defend CJ, but I just think some of the criticism is silly. But Tom, anything else before we go?
I think that's it. I think we've all heard enough of your hateful criticism of C.J. Stroud for the day. And don't worry though, friends, we'll be back tomorrow with another new episode where I'm sure Tony will just invent something else to, I don't know. I don't like the way he wears his socks. It just doesn't work for me.
Now I'm getting into Colin Cowherd territory. Just random criticisms of quarterbacks that are awkward. So that will do it then for all of us here. Thank you for tuning in. As always, check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Check us out at YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.